Usually when you open a book or, sit down with a story, there's this implicit contract between you and the author, like a genre contract.
Right, yeah. You kind of want to know what you're getting into.
Exactly. Like, if you start a fairy tale with a magical princess, you are promised dragons and true love. If you start a gritty psychological thriller, you prepare yourself for dark, hidden secrets. It's comforting to know what box you're operating in.
Absolutely.
But imagine opening a story that begins with a classic, like Disney-style magical princess, and it ends with her being assassinated by military drones in the streets of Jerusalem,
It is wild.
while the entire globe is like watching on surveillance cameras and celebrating. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a narrative that suffers from just total, unadulterated genre whiplash.
Yeah, it completely refuses to pick a lane. And honestly, that's precisely what makes it such a goldmine.
Yeah.
We're tracking a protagonist named Elisa.
Mm-hmm.
And, on the surface, her journey sounds like pure chaos, just random events.
Total chaos, yeah.
But if you look closely, this wild escalation provides this incredibly unique window into human psychology. It shows us in real time how the mind, how it narrativizes struggle.
Right, like how we make sense of our own problems.
Exactly. It takes our most internal silent battles, things like social anxiety, toxic relationships, religious trauma,
Yeah.
and it just projects them onto this massive cosmic canvas.
So we aren't just looking at what happens to Elisa here. We really want to figure out why her story requires such extreme, bizarre metaphors to just make sense of her reality.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
So let's start with the baseline, the so-called fairy tale. We're in the kingdom of Shelby. King Malik and Queen Penelope, they welcome their new baby girl, Princess Elisa.
A very classic setup.
Super classic. The sun is shining, the kingdom is rejoicing. Her grandma Katerina even predicted the birth, and later she predicts the birth of Elisa's little brother Edvin. And of course, as the crowning fairy tale trope, the creator gives Elisa the gift of song.
Right. It's this completely idyllic, impenetrable setup. You have absolute safety, loving parents, a divine talent.
The perfect life.
But then the author introduces this completely grounded, really mundane betrayal that just shatters the fantasy almost immediately.
Right, Sabrina.
Yeah, Lisa has this best friend named Sabrina who comes from an underprivileged family. And the friendship seems totally solid until they hit the equivalent of, like, middle school.
Which is brutal for anyone.
Totally brutal. So Sabrina betrays Elisa for a new popular girl. She actually weaponizes Elisa's secret gift of song, exposing it to the other girls who just instantly be viciously mocking and bullying Elisa out of pure jealousy.
And this is where the genre contract first just tears right in half. I mean, we go from Sleeping Beauty to essentially a clinical psychology textbook on childhood sensory overload.
Yeah, it gets incredibly real very fast.
The text describes Elisa hardly singing anymore. She closes up, quote, like a clam into her shell. But it's the physical descriptions of her anxiety that are just so arresting to me.
They're so specific.
Right, she gets these severe stomach aches. She can't eat in the mornings. Her clothes suddenly feel disgustingly tight and rough against her skin.
Yeah.
Even her ponytail feels like it's tightening her scalp and causing her actual physical pain.
Which is fascinating because the somatic symptoms there are just incredibly accurate. When a child experiences severe social trauma or bullying, the nervous system often just misfires.
Like it's on high alert all the time?
Exactly. The magic of her song functions here as this brilliant metaphor for neurodivergence, or, simply a unique trait that marks a child as different.
Right, a target.
When she's targeted, the anxiety doesn't just live in her head. It manifests physically in her body. The rough clothes and the painful ponytail, those are textbook signs of sensory overstimulation. Her environment has literally become unbearable to touch.
Which, I mean, think about the last time you were so stressed your skin practically crawled, or a tight collar made you feel like you were suffocating. The author is taking that very real, very biological panic response and dropping it right onto a fairy tale princess.
It grounds the fantasy in such a stark reality.
It really does. And then it gets worse because she loses her main emotional anchor. Grandma Katerina passes away.
Yeah, that's the breaking point.
Elisa is now a teenager, and she's utterly broken by grief. Which transitions us from childhood bullying to our next theme, which is how unaddressed trauma just creates a magnet for exploitation.
Because vulnerability is essentially a beacon for predators. Elisa is desperate for relief from her depression, and she's lured into this bizarre little shop by some beautiful clothes in the window.
Just a normal shop, supposedly.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
But inside is this small, hunched woman who immediately hones in on Elisa's sadness. She claims to be a healer who can cure her sorrow, and invites the teenager to her secluded cottage.
But the invitation is, it's weird.
Very weird. It comes with these highly specific, ritualistic rules. Elisa must wear pure white clothes, bring exactly 2 flowers, and slide money through a specific hatch in the hallway.
Okay, and her white clothes can have absolutely no jewelry and no zippers. Let's just pause on that detail for a second. No zippers.
I know, it's such a bizarre thing to focus on.
Why is that specific, frankly, weird detail included? I mean, if we're talking about a magical healer, zippers feel entirely out of place. It sounds less like an ancient occult ritual and much more like this elaborate, highly controlling scam designed to just disorient a grieving teenager.
Well, that ambiguity is actually the point.
Yeah.
When you study the mechanics of cults or controlling scams, the absurdity of the rules is a feature, not a bug.
Wait, really? How does that work?
By forcing the victim to adhere to bizarre, hyper-specific demands, like finding zipperless white clothing, the manipulator forces the victim to invest effort.
Ah, so they're already buying into it.
Exactly. It makes the magic feel authentic because it requires this rigorous alien protocol. The mind is just so desperate for a cure for its grief, it accepts the zipper rule as a legitimate supernatural law rather than seeing it as a glaring red flag.
It's an isolation tactic.
100%.
So Elisa complies. She lies down in the cottage. The healer waves her hands over her, babbling in some secret language. The woman leaves the room. Elisa hears the trickling of running water, and when the woman returns, we get the horrifying psychological reveal. The healer now possesses Grandma Katerina's eyes.
Which is just a masterclass in horror imagery.
It's terrifying.
But it's also a profound statement on how the traumatized mind spirals. Did the woman actually steal the grandmother's eyes? Or is Elisa's brain, vibrating with grief and anxiety, just projecting her deepest sorrow onto the face of her manipulator?
She sees what she's most afraid of.
Right. The woman promised peace, but instead she manifested the exact focal point of Elisa's trauma. Elisa flees in absolute terror, entirely unable to trust her own perception of reality.
And fleeing the creepy supernatural healer is one thing, but it leaves this psychological void.
Yeah.
And this brings us to a really fascinating transition in the deep dive. It's almost like an immune system response.
How do you mean?
Well, Elisa's brain just built up antibodies against weird supernatural threats and creepy cottages, so the next threat she faces has to sneak in looking completely normal and mundane. She turns to alcohol to numb the pain, and at 19, she starts dating this guy named Hubert.
Yes, Hubert. He is the complete antithesis of the magical healer. He is a grounded, earthly disaster.
Such a disaster.
He tries to impress Elisa by speeding on an icy road, loses control, and spins into a snowbank, nearly hitting a light pole. A sheriff immediately shows up to issue a fine, and the car is towed.
It's so pathetic.
He is a walking liability. Yet, Elisa stays with him until she catches him cheating on her at a birthday party.
Which is such an everyday, mundane flavor of toxicity. She realizes he just wanted a casual friend with benefits, calls him an idiot, and leaves to go partying. Now, if you're listening to this, you might be wondering why a story with magical healers and magical songs is wasting time on a bad boyfriend who gets a traffic ticket.
Right, it feels out of place. But it's there because Hubert lowers her defenses. By dealing with a mundane jerk, she feels like she's navigated the world of adult relationships.
She thinks she's got it all figured out.
Exactly. She goes to another party looking for her dream prince, feeling worldly and experienced. Instead, she meets a tipsy man who the text describes as dancing like possessed by evil.
What an image.
He's charming, gets her number, takes her on a date. But the reality is far darker. He casts a literal wicked spell on her called the Demon of Shame.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of this demon. We get a magical, literal monster, but look at its actual effects on Elisa. It physically paralyzes her. She's frozen in place, terrified of being left alone.
Yeah, the psychology of it is so clear.
The demon whispers wicked thoughts, making her blame herself for everything, convincing her that she must please him to earn better treatment. Plus, he isolates her in a forest cottage and forces her to do heavy labor in woodwork.
Woodwork, of all things.
Right. I mean, this isn't a fantasy monster. This is a one-to-one allegory for being trapped in a highly manipulative domestic abuse situation.
It absolutely is. And the externalization of abuse is a known psychological defense mechanism. If you view your abuser's horrific behavior as just a bad personality, you can easily fall into the trap of thinking, if I'm just a little bit better, he won't be so mean.
You internalize the blame?
Exactly. You internalize it. But by literally labeling the abuse a demon, the narrative illustrates how the victim can separate the abuse from their own self-worth. The demon is the problem.
But even knowing that, the shame creates this paralyzing cage. She's terrified of what people would say if they knew she had been tricked.
Classic victim isolation.
So how does the narrative break her out of this psychological prison? Enter Queen Ninette from a far-off land. Ninette remembers Elisa's beautiful singing voice from childhood and tracks her down for singing auditions.
Which is such a great turning point.
She finds the forest cottage and brilliantly uses a fake emergency to get Elisa out of the house.
Notice what doesn't happen here, though. There is no knight in shining armor arriving with a sword to slay the demon of shame.
Oh, that's a great point.
Ninette provides a rescue of validation.
That distinction changes the entire framing. Ninette reminds Elisa of who she used to be before the trauma. When Elisa hears that praise, she realizes she loves her gift of singing way more than she fears this abusive man. She uses that spark of self-worth to literally yank herself free from the demon's chain and escapes to pursue her dream.
The mentor doesn't fight the battle for her. The mentor hands the victim the mirror they need to remember their own strength. It's a beautiful representation of how domestic abuse survivors often need an external validating force to help them break their own chains.
But escaping the abuser is just the beginning of recovery. Elisa goes to singing school, she graduates, but the trauma lingers, the depression returns. The demon of shame causes these nasty physical convulsions that leave her crying on the floor.
The body keeps the score, as they say.
Exactly. She realizes that individual willpower just isn't enough. She needs a community to fully heal, which introduces an entirely new, incredibly intense genre to our story, tactical spiritual warfare.
Tactical spiritual warfare. Faith enters the narrative not just as a belief system, but as a literal militarized shield.
Right.
She joins a local Bible circle and meets a kind man named Toivo, sparking a genuine love story. But the universe responds to her healing by escalating the threat. A literal witch named Evil Marina lives near Elisa's castle and wants to siphon Elisa's gift of song.
Of course she does.
Marina casts spells to separate Elisa and Toivo, but their shared prayers act as a force field, blocking all of the witch's strikes.
So the internal psychological battle has now fully transitioned into an external cosmic war, which leads them directly into the most insane trap of the entire narrative.
This part is just...
It's bananas.
Yeah.
Elisa receives a glowing letter praising her as a skilled princess and inviting her to a princess course on singing and leadership at Bloodseco Manor. They drive out into the middle of nowhere and find this dilapidated, flimsy house.
Yeah, the setting shifts immediately into supernatural horror here.
Yeah.
Inside the manor, a cheerfully sick woman offers them coffee. But Toivo's instincts kick in. He smells old liquor mixed with something unidentifiable and foul.
Creepy.
Then he spots a tiny red light shining from a hidden camera in the living room.
Global surveillance making its first appearance.
Right. Suddenly, a dark figure grabs Elisa, yanks her into a room, locks Toivo outside, and the windows just slam shut on their own. The figure ties Elisa to a chair. It turns out the sick woman was just bait for a highly dangerous, chaotic Black Angel.
And here is where the narrative just shatters reality completely.
Oh, yeah?
The Black Angel pulls out 2 guns to threaten her, puts on Latin music, dances crazily around the room, and starts blasting lamps down with the guns just to scare her.
The sheer absurdity of that scene is jarring.
It's beyond jarring. I mean, dancing to Latin music, shooting lamps. We just went from a quiet Bible study to a home invasion directed by a surrealist filmmaker.
Yeah.
How are we supposed to process this massive genre whiplash?
Well, you have to look at it through the lens of how intrusive trauma actually feels to the survivor.
Okay, explain that.
When you're fighting a deep spiritual or psychological battle, the threat doesn't always present itself as a solemn, gothic demon. Often, panic attacks or intrusive thoughts feel chaotic, mocking, loud, and violently disruptive.
It don't make sense.
Right. The absurdity of the Black Angel dancing and shooting lamps perfectly captures the nonsensical, overwhelming noise of severe anxiety. It's literal terrorism of the mind.
So how do you fight something that chaotic? Elisa sings a prayer, summoning a blinding golden angel to disarm the Black Angel.
But while that divine intervention is happening internally, Toivo is outside relying on a very different kind of salvation.
A very different kind. He remembers a special emergency code on his phone. He presses it, and suddenly, military helicopters and tanks arrive, surrounding the flimsy house.
As one does.
Right. A guy named Whiteheart Jason literally smashes the door down, grabs the Black Angel, and tosses him into a car like they're executing a SWAT raid.
Heaven and helicopters. That's the core philosophy of this segment. Resolving deep, entrenched trauma requires multiple simultaneous layers of support.
That makes a lot of sense.
You have the divine intervention, Lisa's internal spiritual strength summoning the golden angel. But the author makes it clear that prayer alone isn't the whole solution.
Right, you need the backup.
You also need militaristic, tactical action, represented by the 12 disciples, or White Hearts, and Jason. This represents the fierce, practical, earthly community defense required to physically extract someone from a dangerous situation.
You need the spiritual fortitude to survive the chair, and you need the boots-on-the-ground support network to kick the door down. I love that. But they are going to need every single helicopter they can get, because if trauma requires a SWAT team to resolve, what happens when that personal anxiety scales up?
It explodes.
Exactly. The personal battles of Elisa and Toivo can no longer be contained. They suddenly spill over into a global apocalyptic war.
We jump straight from a haunted house thriller into the Book of Revelation. Black Angels begin a coordinated assault on northern Finland.
Naturally.
Elisa and Toivo pivot from victims to saviors, helping Jewish refugees flee in convoy trucks. Fighter jets break the sound barrier overhead, and a massive 30-meter fire angel manifests to protect them, just detonating enemy fighter jets into fireballs in the sky. The White Hearts are fighting block by block in the streets to secure a path to a cargo ship.
The scale is staggering. I mean, they get the refugees onto a cargo ship heading to Haifa, but the environment itself turns against them. A massive storm rises. Black clouds cover the sky and literally morph into screaming, ugly faces.
It's so cinematic.
Black helicopters attack from the sky while enemy warships attack from the sea. The refugees are screaming in panic, but Toivo stands on the deck and yells at them to be silent, declaring that God is fighting for them.
He essentially steps into the archetype of Moses at the Red Sea,
Wow.
but updated for modern warfare.
Oh.
He raises his staff to the sky. Whirlpools open up in the ocean, swallowing the warships whole. Massive lightning bolts strike the clouds, obliterating the screaming faces. Lightning shears the black helicopters in half. He slams his staff onto the deck, earthquakes swallow the enemy temples on the shore, and the entire cargo ship is instantly teleported in a flash of blinding brightness straight to the port of Haifa.
We have to ask, who is orchestrating this level of destruction? The narrative blends ancient fears with very modern technological anxieties. The ultimate enemy is the Antichrist.
Right.
And he isn't sitting on a throne of bones. He is operating out of a high-tech temple shaped like a giant black pearl. He's sitting inside, declaring himself a god through a microphone to a global populace that has all been forcibly microchipped.
It's a fascinating cocktail of apocalyptic projection. You have classic biblical eschatology, the Antichrist, the mark of the beast, mashed up with 21st century conspiracy tropes like microchips, global camera surveillance, and weaponized drones.
It's very now.
It reflects a modern anxiety where the loss of privacy and the overreach of technology are viewed as literal tools of the devil.
Which brings us to the final stand. Toivo and Elisa go right to the streets of Jerusalem to preach to the masses. The Antichrist sees them on his monitors, laughs this terrible dark laugh, and yells, "I got them."
Like a cartoon villain.
Exactly. Black Humvees and vans surround the couple. Black angels step out and load automatic weapons. But Elisa and Toivo are no longer the frightened victims from the forest cottage. They breathe literal flames of fire from their mouths, turning the attacking angels to ash on the street.
It is the ultimate empowerment fantasy against an overwhelming systemic darkness. They have completely weaponized their trauma.
But the Antichrist has one last technological trick. He presses a button inside his black pearl, deploying a swarm of drones armed with rapid-fire weapons.
The drones.
Toivo throws himself in front of Elisa to protect her, but the drone bullets pierce them both. Elisa coughs blood, looks at Toivo, says, "My love," and they die together on the streets of Jerusalem.
A cinematic, tragic martyrdom. But the detail that follows their death is perhaps the most chilling observation on modern society in the entire text.
It really is. The world watches their assassination live via camera feeds. And the populace, completely corrupted and microchipped, actually celebrates their deaths by giving each other Christmas presents.
Wow.
Think about the psychological weight of that image. It's the ultimate feeling of alienation, when the world actively rejoices in your suffering, twisting a sacred holiday of peace into a celebration of your murder.
It represents the complete inversion of morality. But adhering to the genre contract of biblical prophecy, the story doesn't end in the street.
No, it doesn't.
3 days later, the Holy Spirit descends. Elisa and Toigo are resurrected, brought back to life right in front of the cameras.
And the Antichrist's reaction to this miraculous resurrection is just incredible. He watches his ultimate victory fall apart. He flies into a rage and he yells, "Arg, Team Halt 2."
It is such a bizarre, hilariously petty exclamation to drop into the climax of a global apocalypse.
It grounds this massive cosmic dread in a highly specific, almost comical personal grievance. Team Halt 2 sounds like a local sports rivalry, not the dying curse of the ultimate evil.
Exactly.
Then the earth shakes, the Mount of Olives splits in half, Jesus calls them up, and Toivo and Elisa ascend into the blinding brightness of the Golden City, leaving the Antichrist and his drones behind.
So when you step back and look at the entirety of this deep dive, a clear, profound pattern really emerges from all the chaos.
Yeah, I mean, we started with a little girl worrying about a tight ponytail and a rough shirt in Shell Bay, and we ended with her breathing fire and being assassinated by drones in Jerusalem. It is the definition of narrative escalation.
But while the details are totally surreal, the core of the story is deeply human. It shows how human beings utilize vast, epic imagery to make sense of our pain.
To externalize it.
Right. When internal pain is just too big to process, we project it outward. A bad breakup or an abusive partner becomes a literal demon of shame. Overcoming anxiety and needing community support becomes a tactical SWAT raid with helicopters. We externalize the unbearable so that we can finally comprehend it.
We turn our complex, messy struggles into literal monsters with fangs and guns just so we can finally figure out how to defeat them.
That's exactly it.
Which leaves you with a final thought to mull over today as you go about your week. If you had to write your own life's challenges, your anxieties, your toxic jobs, your bad relationships, as literal monsters or villains, what form would they take? And more importantly, who would be on your tactical rescue squad when the helicopters finally arrive?